Welcome everyone. Oh, are we on? We're up. So welcome to our Future of Storytelling panel, everyone live. And I guess the Future of Panel now that we're being filmed in VR 3D. I'm kind of loving that. I'm just going to acknowledge that. So I'm Gordon Bellamy. I'll be your moderator. I'm at USC. I'm also with a VR startup called The Wave, which is about democratizing live music. And let the gentlemen of our panel introduce themselves, starting with Eden Chen.
Hey, I'm Eden. I work at Fisherman Labs. We make game development, website development. We do a lot of app development, emerging tech. We've just launched or helped launch Sony's Ghostbusters VR about a week and a half ago, and then have worked on with Qualcomm, NBC, a lot of other companies on VR. So happy to be here, and yeah.
Thank you, Jake. Yeah.
Jake Dorn, I'm with Main Path Marketing down in San Diego. Also work closely with Fisherman Labs. Previously was at WPP and kind of come from the emerging tech world.
Hi everybody, I'm Jim. I work for a company called Folklore. We do digital product development, a lot of industrial and interface design for companies like Verizon, as well as VR experiences for a lot of the studios here in Hollywood. So I'm super excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Peter. I've been directing VR for 4 years, which makes me a veteran, apparently. So we've been started out doing 360 videos. I have one of the 10 most watched videos on YouTube of 360, which gives you a sense of scale. There's only 8 million views, but that's a lot in VR terms. And yeah, I tell stories with VR.
Hi, I'm Daniel Kenyon. I'm with Furious M. Furious M is a VR development company. We have a platform for managing VR and enhancing user experience. And to begin our process, we began working with production companies and specifically live action productions in VR. Defrost is the first project that we're associated with, and we'll talk about that later.
Cool. And this is, of course, of service to you. So if you have questions along the way, just let us know. Raise your hand. That's what we're here for. But let's begin with skepticism. There's a bit of skepticism around storytelling in VR, yet here we are on the leading edge of it. Why don't we talk a little about that? I'll start with you, Eden. Talk about some of the skepticism people are expressing.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't normally be in a conversation about storytelling because I come from a game development background. So games traditionally tell stories by using something called cutscenes. So like you'll be in a game. You guys have probably played a game before, and they'll take you out of the cutscene into like a story, and then you'll go back and play the game again. And now we're at the stage where we have kind of a convergence of Hollywood and gaming in a lot of ways with VR. So you have VR, which tells stories live, much like a game does, and then you have traditional storytelling or cinematic storytelling, which tells stories retrospectively. So the problem with that in some ways is that as the person in the VR experience, a lot of times you start thinking, what does the maker want me to do? Which is a problem, So that's something I just want to kind of throw out there just to maybe start this off and start the conversation of how we can combat things like that. There should be a natural storytelling when we tell stories in VR. So the user shouldn't be thinking, what should I be doing in this process? They should be thinking, they shouldn't be thinking at all. They should just be immersed in the experience.
That's a good point. You jump in there.
Yeah, I think there's a skepticism that sort of revolves around the difference between traditional content production and really the possibilities within VR. I don't think anybody's even scratched where this all goes. So there's just this natural, like, well, is it really going to be like this? And the answer is no. And what will it be? And the answer is I don't know. And that just inherently clouds vision for people. So I think that's sort of what we're seeing.
Mm-hmm. You may talk a little about the taxonomy that's forming. You know what? Even better question. How long are you keeping people in right now? How long a story are you even allowed to tell nowadays? 5 minutes, 30 seconds?
Depends if they throw up or not, I guess.
No, but
that's one of the things.
Sure, but I'm just like, what is even the framing now for what you're able to do?
It really depends on the setting, but we did curate the U.S. experience for VR at Next at the Cannes Film Festival, where we had 37 minutes of continuous VR viewed on Samsung Gears by approximately 45 people, and nobody threw their headset off and no one got sick. So we know that that's possible. I also know of a new movie.
4 people exploded, though. So.
Yeah. Actually, it was.
If there's anybody from Samsung here, I'm kidding. I have one. I'm sorry.
So, yeah, actually, We don't know what the upward limits are, and I think that I've heard that there are people that have stayed in VR for over days. So
I mean, right now, typically on average, we're seeing like, at least on the game side, about like at most 5-minute experiences. If you look at like the Star Wars experience that came out, that's like probably like 2 to 3 minute experience, and that's like on the longer side.
Super limited by hardware, and you know, the state of the entire device ecosystem is so nascent. It's akin to like hauling around you know, those big gray cell phones that had the cord. I mean, it's really at that stage right now. So, you know, to say what's possible today is sort of like saying where will mobility go in 1987? I don't know.
How about you, Peter? What are you doing?
Well, actually, I read about the first feature-length VR film, 112 minutes.
Whoa. Tell
About-
us more.
Which I've not tried. I'm not sure if I actually want to try it. It's about Jesus. Okay.
Oh yeah, oh gosh.
Yeah.
I think I heard
And,
another conference like a year and a half ago. It's done.
It's done, yeah. And no one's seen it, so.
But I just think like Passion of the Christ Jesus, like
actually-
it's gonna be like rawr, like
yeah, it just
full on.
debuted at the Venice Film Festival. Yeah, so only 40 minutes.
A teaser for the full
Yeah.
epic.
I actually edited a video in Oculus. So I had an Oculus on and sitting next to the editor. And I kind of completely forgot about time. So I was in there for 4 hours. And literally, when I took the headset off, I was cross-eyed, right? Because the parallax it was a stereoscopic 3D video. It was for Ray LaMontagne. My eyes just started moving it in naturally.
Sure.
So I had the biggest headache ever, having come out of that. So
Kind
I
of the
don't recommend
OptiGrab?
being in. Yeah, it was. So
Oh,
that
whoa.
was bad. But people are talking
Trademark.
about, you know, with PlayStation VR just launching last week, people will have those headsets on all day. You know, so there's no.
Or
feedback.
will they? I mean, maybe it doesn't work like that if they sit in there.
It shouldn't
Twice.
work like that, but
You know,
it
I
will.
saw something on Reddit. There was a guy who just took a picture of his roommate from like 12 midnight to 6 in the morning every 30 minutes, and he
Yeah.
just has it on the whole time, and
wow.
he's just degrading in his like physical state, and then by the
Yes.
end he's just laying there, sort of. But yeah, there's definitely the
It's up to technology to make this better, cleaner, faster, and it will happen. And it's happening at a remarkable pace at this point. And I think within, this time next year, you're going to see vast improvements over what's out today.
I think that's also where some of the skepticism comes in, though, because VR has been talked about, this emerging technology, for the last 4 years, and I think it's almost got kind of the dipping dots, which is the ice cream of the future. There's only so long you can be the ice cream of the future.
Yes.
So
Which, of course, is
I
the
think
astronaut
that's
ice
where
cream, but
it's
yeah.
healthy.
Yeah.
Skepticism. I think we actually had a question.
You know, you've got full body VR where people are running around and lifting their arms up and dancing for 20 minutes until their heart gives out.
Running on treadmills, yeah, all of that stuff's
Versus
possible.
360 VR, which is as long as your eyes hold out or the device doesn't cause you to pass out because it's too hot. So there's two different time limits happening on two different types of platforms.
Yeah, we should probably make a distinction between the types of VR, because obviously everyone lumps it all together. But there's 360, which is probably what most people have seen, which is using cameras. GoPro kind of adaptations, Samsung 360. But then where we're all moving right now is what we call VR is more of an immersive experience. So that could be room scale VR, which is HTC Vive, Sony PlayStation, Oculus, where you can actually physically move around a 60 square foot space. And that's completely different model of production and storytelling from GoPro. So I think we need to kind of almost define the types of VR we're actually discussing.
Can I throw a third, which would be AR storytelling? And I just thought about if you ever told a kid a bedtime story, right? I sort of imagine a world where AR storytelling, where you could both see, the pop-up book, as it were, would be another important, where people can do it. We're doing it together versus a solitary experience.
Yeah, that actually becomes the true edge of storytelling right now, that interactivity, the ability to incorporate mobile devices and to do so elegantly so that you are trying to achieve that authentic experience of creating presence in an artificial environment. If you can do, that's the goal, right, of VR. And whatever the technology is, whatever the camera device, the capture device, the CG device, all of that stuff becomes, it's amorphous and it's going to change.
So what sort of must see now? I mean, you are living at the edge of storytelling right now. So besides, of course, Jesus VR, what more secular works are also available to people? I mean, does everyone out here have VR? Let's start there. Raise your hand if you have VR, just so I have a sense of who has it. Oh, interesting. Raise your hand if you do not have VR.
Does everybody here have a cell phone? Then you have VR.
Yeah. Okay.
So maybe define that,
Yeah,
right? VR
yeah.
versus a
Headset
headset
VR,
device
yeah.
versus.
Yeah. So across those different media, like what should people be looking at now to be at the edge of storytelling?
You know, I'm going to throw this out there.
Please.
This is one of the reasons that skepticism exists, is that there is no killer app nor killer production for VR yet. What
Okay.
we've seen, it's essentially it really is like the new art of B content, B filmmaking. It's very much startup driven. You know, there
Wait,
really
except for you,
hasn't
Peter,
been
we
a
love your
lot of
stuff.
weight put into these productions yet, in terms of budget, in terms of activity from the studios in earnest. Everybody seems to be sort of playing around with this technology, and the reason is because consumer adoption is low. So as consumer adoption starts to go up, you're going to start to see these productions get more akin to what people expect, both in terms of games and film and TV and movies, and then you'll start to see a lot more, important content showing up on in this format. But right now, like in terms of what's out there to see, it's all sort of like Star Wars, right? There's Star Wars, the cinematic universe, and then there's Star Wars VR. Star Wars VR is all of 5 minutes of, like what are you going to do with that?
So the coming barrage of original content will probably start appearing at the end of next year. There are a lot of features and mostly episodics that are being funded currently, so we're going to see a higher quality of content. But it's going to be depending upon access and the democratization of VR, if you will, and how audiences can embrace that. Mobile devices are going to play a huge role, and even though right now most mobile devices are focused on 360, you can actually do higher quality VR-like experiences using mobile devices. So we think that's one of the best ways to start telling stories to reach the world.
Eden.
It's also like kind of a chicken and egg issue, as like any emerging technology is, on like content versus technology versus consumer adoption. And I think, like, just to give you to answer your question, there's PSVR that just came out. There's the Vive that you can buy for $800, but you need probably like a $2,000 computer to run that. And then you have Oculus and mobile as well. So that's like your landscape. But for us, we used to make mobile games, and we stopped making mobile games proprietarily, at least, because there was too much competition out there. Too many indie developers out there. There were thousands of games coming out every single day, and it was very, very expensive to acquire users. We started doing VR game development about 6 months ago, and working on proprietary experiences because there wasn't a lot of competition. So. That's where it becomes interesting, because developers like us are starting to work on VR because we see that there's not a lot of competition out there, and there's a huge opportunity because of the consumer
Are you focused
adoption.
on adaptation or focused on creating original works inside the medium?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, both. And a lot of it has to do with like what incentive do we as developers have to work on something in new technology. So it has to be either there's like less competition and we see that consumer adoption is coming, and I think those things are true with VR, which makes it exciting.
So in the back room, we talked a bit about direction and what it meant to be a director of content, creator of content. I'll point this back to you, Peter. I'd love to talk about that, and I'd also love to talk about, I guess, the part B will be the emergence of a lingua franca for viewers, right? And even to know how to view, if that's what you even call it, whatever the verb is going to be to I don't know, whatever that verb is, to watch and enjoy this content.
I mean, we were discussing backstage. The big difference in directing VR is that you can't be on set. You can't be behind the camera anymore. So you're not directing the actor, you're not directing the subject, because you'd be in the shot. You'd be 180 of that shot. So the biggest challenge I found directing VR is not being there. So you have to we're saying it's more like stage directing. So it's like directing a play. You have to choreograph the actors, tell them what to do, and then leave. And I've been in the most weird vantage points. I've been up trees, in caves, hiding with a little monitor. I mean, it's so bizarre, and the actors are have no idea what's going on. So,
Now, did you come from theater? Like, how did you prepare yourself for that? Or are you learning in the trade?
I'm so not prepared for that. I'm from a documentary background. So, and I think it's worth mentioning that, you know, some of the biggest successes right now in terms of storytelling is from documentary. I think all the United Nations stuff is incredible. Being able to have the POV of a child in Syria is probably one of the most, you know, powerful uses of VR to date. So I think, you know, those types of situations where something real is happening and you're putting a camera in the center of it and giving you a point of view on that is incredibly impactful. I think the scripted VR needs to catch up. That's as we were saying, there's not so much of that right now, and that's again due to the fact there's no monetization. None of this content, incidentally, is selling. I've probably made the only piece of VR that we sold, which is for Sports Illustrated. So I wouldn't even classify that as storytelling, but we sold each piece of that content for $1.99, but most of this stuff is available freely, and that's also limiting the amount of stories that are being told right now, because, you know, if you can't sell it, who's paying for it?
We're going to drill a little deeper for everyone who's not familiar with what you... Tell them about what you made for Sports Illustrated.
So we actually we were asked to just convert the magazine into VR. They were like, let's do a shoot and create that in 360. So of course I'm trying to make it a bit more complicated because it's what I tend to do. So we shot using plates. So I actually shot using two different camera systems. I used a GoPro system where we actually just captured.
Does everyone know what plates are? Do you know what he means? Tell them what you mean.
So essentially, you shoot one plate at
there
a
you go.
time. So there's 4 quadrants in VR. So you basically just shoot them individually and stitch them together later. So that actually does allow you to be behind the camera, which is helpful. I did a music video for the New York Times for a band called Run the Jewels, and we shot it individually. So I had the same actors in each frame. So we had a before and after story going on. So depending on which way you looked, you could get a different interpretation of the same story. So it's the same story playing out in real time from 4 directions, before and after. So that was, you know, that was probably the most advanced form of storytelling that we've used in VR. But there's a million forms of narrative in film that apply to VR. You know, there's a Catherine Bigelow film called Strange Days that I would love to do in VR, which is entirely about point of view experience. You know, there's you know, Strange Days, Shortcuts, there's multiple narratives playing out simultaneously, Magnolia. So there's a ton of lessons to be learned from Hollywood filmmaking, but right now the budgets aren't there to actually make these things.
So it seems like you're sort of starting to touch on having rewatchability, like a reason for people to return to VR content, and I guess in a way that's trying to give agency to the viewer. So maybe talk a little about that, about the emergence of agency of the viewer or the participant or whatever you call them in your VR storytelling.
With Defrost, it was conceptualized as an episodic, so there are actually 12 episodes. And you start out with the first-person point of view as a cryogenically frozen woman who's resuscitated 30 years later. And the person is actually in a wheelchair. Our director took on the role of being the person that pushes the wheelchair. Randall Kleiser directed it, and so he envisioned this world where he would simply be a non-participant in the story, but he's right there, able to direct Carl Weathers and Bruce Davidson and some of the other actors who are very professional, but still had a little bit of guidance. So because it's an episodic, there are going to be hooks in each episode to bring people back, but with Defrost, we're able to drive that concept of achieving presence through the point of view perspective and having the individual take on that role of the character. And we use the term user because sound is as important as viewing. And if you can incorporate sound into that perspective, it works 90% better than having non-directional sound or lacking.
All the way down the line, I want to hear what you think. Agency of the user? What's the term? Yeah, even what the term is. What is the, what do you even call someone who comes to one of the shows?
Agency, you can't really have agency if you're shooting with a video camera, because this agency is interactive, right? So this is more of a game engine world. So you would have to, and there's not so much of this going on right now, but there's a lot of that kind of interactive narrative game engine stuff going into video, but I think when it's going to get really interesting is when you volumetrically capture the characters and apply AI to them. So they can actually respond to you. They can look at you. They know you're in the room. I think that's what we're talking about with agency. I hate VR when someone's not looking at you, but they're talking kind of slightly off-center, and it disconnects you, takes you out of the experience.
It's kind of a lean-back observational experience more than achieving that. One of the things that Randall used in Defrost was the capability of having this person in a wheelchair, so when we're displaying at some festivals, we'll actually see people in wheelchair and actually use Sense of Scented Hospital and some of those things. And we actually had some people having difficulty getting out of the wheelchair when they were finished. They're like, I can't move, I'm frozen.
Kind of doubling down on some of the concepts that they touched on. One of the things that we've been working on for the last year and a half is a multi-dimensional database to serve content up within VR based on emotional and biometric input. So we've got a system that uses off-the-shelf EEG monitors and biometric monitors tied to an entirely new way to categorize and content or apply taxonomy to content. So what we're doing is trying to develop a system for gauging affinity or emotional reaction to content within an experience, and then changing that based on what we're seeing on the fly. And that's, if you want to leap very far forward into what VR becomes, it is a convergence of game mechanics and inputs that puts the user into an entirely different position. It's essentially taking away fixed narrative and changing it to more of a sandbox mentality, which is some of the things that we're trying to do already. So it's interesting.
How about you, Jake?
Yeah, I think going back to our earlier comments about the gaming industry in Hollywood and the collision that's happening and juxtaposing those two against each other, I think we have to lean more towards the gaming industry and towards the ability of the user or the audience to be fully immersed and really have their own free will throughout the production versus the director trying to steer.
Yeah, we threw out like open world gaming, like Metal Gear Solid 5 and Red Dead Redemption and some of these things, right? They're very much the litmus for what we'll be seeing in the future. And I think people that have already begun to grasp that are working on those concepts. That's some of the stuff that'll be coming out over the next few years.
I mean, even in the current environment, what the most successful games have done is remove all human faces, if you've noticed, and part of the problem is that we're not there yet. So the human brain has a very astute ability to tell whether a smile is a genuine smile or not a genuine smile. So if you look at like the Star Wars experience, for example, they don't have you don't see any human faces. You just see stormtroopers, and you see robots, and all the great experiences.
Has anyone out there seen Star Wars? Does anyone know what he's talking about? Okay, just want to see.
Yeah, so I mean, you
see,
want
early adoption, it's not being adopted yet. No one knows. No one knows what you're
yeah.
talking about. There will be no faces.
Yeah, but all the best experiences, you won't see human faces yet. So that is in the future where where we will be able to interact with AI, but we're not kind of there
Well,
yet.
now I know what I want to know. I want to know about multi-user storytelling, about co-present storytelling in VR.
Yeah, Facebook did a demo I think about a year ago where you could throw paint at your friends and stuff like that. I don't know if anyone messed around with that.
But I almost want like room, something where we could be in different places in the story, like literally different places, because we've taken our room scale and teleported.
I mean, that's exactly what they're working on, right?
Okay.
I mean, that's why they made the acquisition.
Yeah.
Honestly, Facebook bought VR to do that. They want to take the user base, they want to remove them from the website and put them in a virtual environment so that they can react on a different plane or interact on a different plane.
World premiere.
Honestly, it's not that complicated to look at what they're doing and say, wow, that's where this goes. The reality is, though, that it'll take a while. I mean, it's just going to be another 10 years before we see that kind of stuff firing off. But then, that's why there's people already doubling down and investing in things like virtual reality addiction and stuff like that, because we're going to see like a complete altering of the human condition when stuff like, why the hell would you want to go work at McDonald's when you can be like the emperor of the universe?
Yeah,
I'm literally never going to move.
There are definitely ethical considerations when you think of child entertainment. If
Yeah,
you're
the
gearing
Pathfinder.
the subject matter to children, it's great, but if you're gearing the subject matter to adults and children get a hold of that, you can create cognitive chaos at that point because you're really affecting the brain. Once again, back to DeFrost, we're actually creating these environments where people are wondering whether or not that actually occurred to them. We're creating an autobiographical memory within that experience, and it's a cognitive reality at that point. You can go back. So for a child to be able to experience some of these things becomes amazing.
Wow.
And you got to ask yourself, how are we going to control that?
Or you have to ask a police state, because now what you've brought up is the thought of how do you rate and control and limit the content people, because right now it's a bit of the wild east and west, right, where you can get what you want to just click on it, right? So what do you think? Tell us about the future of the limiting of storytelling as you see it.
I think AR is probably more prescient to that, because at least in VR, you can't really move. It blocks off the world. But in AR, you can have an AR glasses on all day. You can be looking at things. No one knows even what you're looking at. I mean, we did been up to Magic Leap a few times, and I'm not allowed to talk about them because they have encyclopedic NDA.
Here, wait, let's ask a question. Better or worse than Pokemon Go?
Oh, no, it's better than that.
Oh, okay, there you go. There's something.
But the AR, that kind of AR is going straight into your optical nervous system, and you're receiving it like a memory. So this is totally different. It's not a screen. Everything else you're looking at is off a screen. It's a cinema, a phone. VR is essentially a phone near your eye. AR is going straight into your brain. So that is really, on a cognitive level, just a whole different ballgame.
So the Microsoft HoloLens will probably be available slightly before Magic Leap becomes available, but Magic Leap stands to set a new bar for. There's going to be new law that's going to have to be created around this. It's going to be amazing.
Do you say new
Because-
laws?
New laws that will be related to
Well,
augmented reality.
so listen, that's what he's saying is that, and this is like a totally different subject than VR, but
Sure.
the advent of the augmented human condition via information is upon us with augmented reality. So when you think about, like, my son's a swimmer, right, and he's in the pool, and he's banging away at a huge long-distance race, right? He doesn't know what's going on around him. It's a very solitary sport. So the kids that succeed in that sport have this inner voice that says, push hard, right?
Yes.
It's a sixth sense that special people have. They have it in public speaking. They have it in nursing. They have it in basketball, right? Some people are just good at things because they have a special power, right?
Okay.
That's about to be taken away
Democratization
and
of special powers.
sold as apps, and that's the future of augmented reality. So like data and intuition and reaction time and all. So the very first kid that shows up to a soccer match with these special glasses on,
Yeah.
right? What does that do to the sport? It changes everything. So to think that there won't be legislation is completely head in the sand.
Absolutely. You will begin affecting cognitive reality. This will replace Adderall as the next best thing to college performance.
Wow.
Wait, you have Adderall?
AR is better than Adderall. That's a very strong statement. So you're saying big
heard it
pharma could be up against our industry, which will slow it down
No,
immeasurably.
I mean, pulling biochemical triggers.
Legalized AR.
Pulling biometric triggers via chemicals is almost going to be changed fundamentally because of the placebo effect of AR. Because the human mind can do a lot of things that we haven't quite realized yet. So like getting rid of your headache, things like this. You don't have to use a drug to mask that. AR and VR therapy could very well help with that. PTSD, all kinds of diseases are already being treated with the power of the mind. There was a study, so these burn victims in Philadelphia, the Children's Hospital in Philadelphia, they would have to have their bandages changed, and it's obviously one of the most painful things you can go through. They started putting VR on these kids with soothing snow scenes, and 60% of them used less opiates during that process.
Wow.
So the amount of painkillers that they needed was reduced because of their state of mind.
So this sounds like we're getting closer now to the future of storytelling.
Well-
right? because these are actually these experiences.
Yeah.
If I have that, if I have your swimmer kid and I have that, and you've got, I don't know, effing Star Wars, it's going to be over because I'm going to be like, I'm going to make you just feel better for 30 minutes.
The real term might become story experiencing, even though it's kind of doesn't flow right off the tongue. But the idea that you're no longer telling a story, but enabling someone to experience that, and that their mind is in fact neurologically processing in the same way you process reality. So that's probably the biggest edge that we're going to be coming on, and companies like Magic Leap will be building stories in AR, and the production companies that come from that. We're still 10 years off from that, but VR has been around since 1963, or since the first person discovered a headset could actually transform what they're looking at. And 30 years ago, people were professing that AR was on the precipice. 20 years ago, then 10, but it's here finally. And the commoditization of headsets, I think, is going to happen. You'll see it over this holiday season. Sony, unfortunately, Samsung's going to take a little bit of a breather, but you'll see
hoverboard.
plenty of ads from Google coming up. So stay tuned.
I'm sorry, it's just visceral for me. The energy when you all talk about AR is different than when you talk about VR. I don't know if you can tell. Like when you guys light up.
VR's
So I'm super
environmental
curious.
displacement. Augmented reality is, again, it's an altering of the human condition. So like going away and escaping into a new reality, I don't think many people are all that fundamentally interested in it, though it will be awesome. But when I say like, hey, like if anybody, has anybody ever seen the video Sight? It's a short film done by these guys out of Finland, and it's about this guy who goes on a date with a woman, fires up a dating app, and he just takes her down like there's no tomorrow, right? Because he says my superpowers have been taken away, right? Like I worked really hard to be able to do that, and now this guy just puts on a headset and knows when she's reacting right and knows when she's reacting wrong. And that to me that's way more exciting. People are going to buy that like no tomorrow.
But the duels between people trying to manipulate each other, that's going to be the real like next level. Like
that's why that software will be more expensive. You'll get upgrades.
duh.
Yeah, and I think from a platform perspective, people have talked about VR as the next platform. What's next after mobile?
Sure.
And I think it's actually AR. And I think that's
we have
why
a
people-
question.
Oh, question. No, sorry. Sure.
So along the lines of the snow thing, the opposite of that is, would people be able to feel something painful? Because pain is controlled by your mind, so if it's really that invasive and removable,
Of course.
Sure, I
Of
guess.
course.
Horror
Yeah.
movies.
No,
Yeah.
I mean,
Right?
that's
would you actually feel the sensation? Because
Have you guys? Okay, so everyone's done VR. Like I've already had a thing where you touch a candle in VR and you just in your mind you sort of go like you felt something.
That's real.
right. So yeah.
But that's being combined with technology like hypersonic sound being used to sort of create a facsimile of touch. So there's like people using sound to create the feeling of touching a hologram or things touching you. But yeah, to your point, like in VR, if you've ever like done the like when you're not sure if something is around you and there was nothing there, it's because your mind is extremely powerful.
Yeah.
The,
I've had that, not to sound crazy, like in a dream where I woke up and my hand was tingling where I was cut, which is frightening, but
Sure.
what you're saying with snow, like if that is a possibility, there's
Yes.
manipulation.
Good versus evil.
Yeah. Great power, great responsibility. Yeah, it's gonna be good stuff.
How well regulation works. No problem.
But I mean, there's a market for everything. So people that want to experience VR pain, I'm pretty sure that'll be a big thing on like a.
I know.
I don't even want to talk about where.
Well, we're not going to talk about the importance of AR boarding in the future.
I did.
Truly, we were able with Defrost, we were able to have a few people achieve that level of agency, the presence, if you will, that they felt paralyzed sitting in a wheelchair.
I mean, think of hypnosis, right? How powerful is your mind? And people, if you can.
No, you can wait. First, don't apologize. We're here for you. What's your question?
Okay, so I work with special needs children, autistic children. Could the AR be used in something such as, because autistic children have problems like connecting with emotions.
Sensory.
Can it,
It's a great app.
can it
You should
be
do
used
that.
To kind of like teach them.
Go build that.
Yeah.
Expression, kind of like feel some empathy.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So
Why not?
so the term or the phrase, if you will, is that VR is an empathy machine. It's pretty common.
That's Chris Milk said that.
yeah.
Well, actually, yeah.
Still. I'm just going to comment that, the same panel took place around television in 1958.
That's a really good point, actually.
Well, thanks.
But this time you're all here. Part of history, people. I was going to actually ask
but
about your.
absolutely, I think that
Time to think about it.
managing spectrum disorders of all types can be affected by using highly effective virtual reality and augmented reality, and trained professionals that understand that. And we're actually working with a neuroscientist out of Switzerland that's using our Defrost show to do testing as to how people can feel presence, whether it does it this way, that way, doing A/B testing and some of the other things. So you're going to see a lot more. USC is focused on it. Stanford's focused on it. We're going to see other schools becoming much more user-friendly with VR and incorporating it in part of their
Super interesting about the spectrum becoming sort of like maybe like vision or hearing, right? Where it became transformed by technology and is not such a big deal anymore, where we might not think of spectrum in the same way, you know, with these sorts of tools. I just a quick question about Defrost, about the experience of people who actually were in wheelchairs, maybe who tried it versus people who were not. I'm super curious about that. Did you do any, like, were people who actually were legitimately paralyzed tried your story?
Yeah, you have to be sitting down.
No, I understand that.
Yeah. I mean,
That's, yeah. No, I'm asking, did you ever have people who were physically differently abled?
You're asking a
Yeah.
question.
Try it.
People are actually paralyzed.
Oh.
Mario, Mario's actually administers these experiments, so.
No, we haven't had anyone who's actually physically.
I did Defrost at the DGA, and I'm one of those people who buys into the experience, and it was really compelling, and I did feel like I was, immersed in that world.
So probably the only example that is very anecdotal is Randall Kleiser had a friend of his who had recently had a stroke, and he was about 2 minutes into it and threw the headset and literally threw it at the wall and broke it. He ripped it off and said, "I can't watch this. It's just too painful." This woman doesn't achieve a stroke in the scene, but it's very similar to that feeling.
There you go. No, it's your turn, for sure.
I just want to say, those exact things, like I know, and I think, like they're doing, and even in what was old virtual worlds or old virtual reality, there's been lots of studies and lots of things where people were paralyzed, people who couldn't walk, people who were deaf, all the augmented tools, Second Life, using virtual screens, the ability to fly if you couldn't walk, was given to you using this technology, which actually has been around and being done for about 20 years, and Second Life was one of these things starting in 2006 to today. And Samsar, which is the next one with goggles, is also doing it.
Yes, absolutely.
I'd love to hear you talk more about your experience of directing, where you had the 4 storylines and how you created that story and worked with the actors.
Yeah, there's actually, in terms of the physical production on set, that's the closest you can get to traditional filmmaking. So you're behind the camera, you're talking to the actor. But then the complexity arrives in the edit suite, where you're actually trying to edit 4 stories in parallel. It's almost like using a split screen technique, so there's a lot of movies where you're kind of seeing 2 things happening at the same time. But the actors just, they got lost. They didn't really kind of get it until they saw it on the screen. So no one really knew what I was doing the whole time I was on set, which was slightly disturbing for the crew. But when they put the headset on, they're like, "Oh, that's what you meant," And I was like, "Oh, good, I'm so good at communicating this." But the experience is kind of unique in terms of it's an interactive narrative that you choose. So just depending on which angle you look, so you can look this way, you get one version of the story. So people tend to watch it 4 times, which I love. And you can, but there's an interactive software that I'm using right now called Entry Point, which so they're in New York, and basically they're doing a project at Sundance, and depending on the way you look, that will activate the narrative. So it actually gives you some agency. So it's not like they're all happening at once. You kind of get bored of one story, and then you look away, and another story appears.
Right there, yeah.
I have a question. There have been studies yet, so someone say is on an antipsychotic, or they've been drinking or smoking pot, and then they put this on and start to experience augmented reality or VR. Have they seen any effects of what that can do?
There's all kinds of research going into medicine and the applications of VR right now. There are specifically tracks for drug addiction and treatment. I have not personally seen them. I've been exposed to hospice care, though, so people using VR to.
Yeah, he's asking if people are high in VR. I think he's asking more. He's saying literally.
On medication and substances, then they start to use VR.
Yeah, I think most people with VR headsets are loaded all the time. Actually, I'm completely loaded.
well,
yeah,
yeah, I
I'm
mean-
sobered up for this, but still, I mean, I think in the. No,
But we're also not in VR.
I'm sorry. What's
Oh, or are
the
we?
question? Do they?
What's the effect?
Is that they're already on a substance and
Kind of like a bad trip.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Like tripping with
I
a
would think-
headset on,
One of the
that's a bit
things
much,
is-
dude.
One of the things you have to understand when you do
Yes.
take
Yes.
any type of drug, you're impeding your perception already. And what tends to happen is if you're really wasted, it doesn't affect you because you're not paying attention to anything except what's going on in your mind.
it's
and
like you're
That's
trying
like
to
sleep.
brain hacking
Actually
within brain
normalizes
hacking,
it.
right?
Maybe.
Because
Yeah.
VR in general is brain hacking, right? What virtual reality headsets are is an extremely simple piece of technology, right? What it does is it leverages this crazy inherent power for your mind to do things that make you displace, right? So in the case of doubling up alcohol or that, it's really just it's probably a bit of a cognitive mess.
I've heard a crazy story about acid in VR, and it wasn't when it was in VR, it was after and way after, and it was a pretty wild story. So yeah, there can be some crazy
It'll
It
be
sounds
on
like the
Vice
beginning-
next month.
Yeah, I was gonna say the beginning of the story. Yeah, right there. I see you, and I see you in the back too. But you first.
I think for
Sure.
In terms of like strategy, and there's a difference between being on set and people maybe being frustrated or miscommunications, and then getting the those like coming together.
Yeah.
I just would hope you could speak a little bit more to that, and then
Yeah.
maybe the strategy of working with people on set.
Right.
to solve those goals there.
I mean, of course, you can use a 360-degree rig. I've worked with John, Tozo, all the rigs, and that's a different type of production. That's more like the stage production. So essentially, the actors are alone in the room, and you're off-site looking at that on a monitor. And that's actually much easier to post-produce because it's all done for you. You're just literally stitching it together. And in the case of John, that stitching is done in space. So it gets sent to the cloud, it comes back, it's all done. It's like, wow, it's finished. When you're actually shooting plates and putting it together like that, it's incredibly laborious. Every time you do an edit, it thinks it's a render. You're using so much data, you have 4K images on one screen. All these edit machines are not geared for 16K images. So it took me 2 months to edit a 5-minute piece. So it was like 8 times longer than usual. So there's steep learning curves every time you do VR. It's getting better, it's getting easier, but right now there's such a bottleneck with the cameras and the stitching technology. It's just rubbish, like no one's figured that out really.
It's a great question because production design is essential and pre-production in this category. Just relying on a script and a linear storyboard isn't going to cut it. You've got to start getting dimensionalized and use slices in time, just like games, exactly.
Wait, hold on in the background. I want to skip you because I know you're back there. I saw a hand right in the back. I thought you. Yes, there you are. Hi. You had a question? Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, I see you.
Hi, I'm back here. Yes, I was also going to mention the work that's being done in terms of treatment, drug abuse. A lot of things in VR, just like in storytelling, are based on existing interventions, existing things. So USC's Center Institute for Creative Technology,
Yeah.
they're doing work with PTSD, exposure therapy, based on traditional exposure therapy. Here's the Dolphin Swim Club, amazing, in the Netherlands, working with children about autism. And it's basically based on equine therapy and animal therapy. So all of this, I guess what I wanted to lead to was my question was more about gesture
Yeah.
and haptic technology and that connection. Samsung does have a bedtime stories, there's a HoloLens type environment that tells stories. How is that changing our way of interacting and connecting with each other on a
So let me
The
get down to
haptic-
gestures and
yeah.
haptic experiences. How is that part of the future of storytelling? That's the question.
Yeah, I mean, I've been working with multi-sensory feedback and haptic. So haptics, obviously, touch is a huge part of that. There was a little gadget I tried the other day that actually sends sound through your skeleton, right? So it actually sends, so it actually creates, it changes gravity. right? So I was
Wait,
on.
what? Go slower.
Yeah, okay. So it was an R&D project. It's not commercially available. They just attached this little clip to my ear and didn't tell me what was going to happen next, which I, foolishly just agreed to. And then I put the headset on, and I was in an anti-gravitational state, and I felt lighter. Like my body sort of got lighter. And then they shifted it, and suddenly it got heavier. It was very weird. But there's a lot of
Wait, what's
really
that
interesting
called?
technologies that is really hacking into your body, not into your brain.
No, what is that called? What is that?
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. But there's some amazing haptic stuff going on right now. I mean, Jaron Lanier, when he was talking about VR 30 years ago, had a data suit, which AT&T were investing in, and that's like in the late 80s. So there's a lot of technologies that are actually old. Like binaural sound was invented by the BBC in the 70s. That's positional audio. They invented it after quadraphonic sound. So a lot of these technologies, no one's known what to do with them up until now. So suddenly they're all kind of being aggregated into a VR experience to make it more immersive, which is cool.
Oh, sure.
What does the adult industry know with this kind of technology?
Nothing at all.
No idea.
No.
What are you talking about?
If you Google, which you can't in China, but if you search on VR in China, adult comes up. There's nothing. I mean, it's the first thing that comes
So
up.
they have adult VR experience?
It's all over the place.
Yeah, it's that. Yeah,
There's a monetization strategy in place for that, I think, is what we're saying.
Actually, of
Like a
all
lot
the,
of
of
early
all the money
technologies.
being made in VR right now, that is the only spot.
For monetization.
It's in wide scale production. It's being sold today. It's absolutely being monetized.
And that industry will do a very good job of doing that project and those kinds of things, and they talk about it during their situations. We, in particular, have chosen not to go in that direction, but have been approached, so.
I guess Sports Illustrated is the closest I've come to that, but that was PG-13. But essentially, that did sell. That actually.
Was it the
was-
swimsuit issue?
Yes, yeah. So they gave away 500,000 headsets in the magazine, and the app was free. We got that sponsored by Lexus.
And were these
And then
like 20-year-olds or these like adults, older adults?
they're all adults. Yeah, there's no children in Sports Illustrated. I don't know if you've noticed, but yeah.
Did that experience, were they doing metrics yet in terms of, would you pay $199 for the next year?
Yeah, was it a one-off or was it?
They want to do it again. So I'm assuming they won't tell us how well it did, but clearly it. Yeah.
Yeah,
The monetization plan
Yeah. Yeah.
The first monetization that's going to be coming out shortly is going to be essentially like a subscriber, and you're going to get VR as part of that, right? You'll see that early 2017.
There's a huge VR made $1 billion in China, which no one's really talking about right now, and it's location-based VR. So there's 2,000 arcades where you go and spend $20, go with your friends, so it's like going to the movies, and you experience 6 VR project. Mainly room scale VR, and they're building another 8,000 VR
Wait,
arcades
is
this
it a
year.
part like just? I mean, so let's go with you.
arcade.
But it's an arcade, but where we all go do our own. Okay, let's go to the arcade. We're in China. Okay, we all paid our $20. Then do we part ways and go VR, and I'll catch you in 20, or what's the narrative journey?
It's both. So there's individual experiences and then there's multiplayer. It's I don't know if you know this. There's this system called the Void, which is the first location-based VR experience in the U.S. They did a Ghostbusters pop-up in Madame Tussauds in New York. 30,000 people went through it, paying $50.
Wait, to do what?
To go to it's for the museum. Not,
Well, actually, people with the metrics on that were like people were going to see the Void and having to go to Madame Tussauds. It was brand new. It was a younger audience, and it's 2 scenes from the movie. So it's basically, I don't know if you've seen the movie, but it's the library, and you have an ectoplasm gun and you shoot ghosts. It was awesome, actually. But that, there are some stories that are actually selling right now. They're just not necessarily in the U.S.
So China is actually moving pretty quickly past arcade into theme parks that'll be mixed and blended reality. We'll see those coming online within the next 6 to 12 months, and there are a number of land development organizations that are developing those out. Obviously, Wanda's engaged, but there's several others. We just got back from a tour of China and had, you know.
Tell them about Orlando. They need to know about this. Everyone needs to know.
Well,
Oh, they know.
actually, one of the most amazing things we experienced while we were there is in the city of Nanchang. We were going on a boat ride. It was at the end of a day of long government discussions, et cetera, and they said, we're going to go see the city lights. And we get on a boat, and we're out in the middle of this enormous river, very modern city, and they've essentially programmed a movie to play across 50 modern buildings on the skyline. And for an hour, you witness this extraordinary explosion of a story. The soundtrack is playing on the boat we were on. But this was engineered by the team of people from the tourist organizations that we were meeting with. And quite honestly, was one of the most thrilling things I've ever witnessed. I mean, it's not a light show. It's truly a movie. It makes IMAX look, you know.
Was it like a one-off event, or was it like a nightly nightmare for the local people of Nanchang? Like,
It runs at 8 p.m. every night.
Right?
8 p.m., 8 to 9 p.m. every night. And we thought it was just Friday night. And no, this happens. Yeah, you have to be on the boat to hear the audio. It's part of the experience. But being in this city, it's magnificent.
Yeah.
This goes back a few questions ago. You said you came from docs, and now you're talking about giving up, a lot of agency to the user. Was there a point where you remember being okay with, now I'm giving up control? And how did you kind of work that into your directing and psyche of you know what, this is a beautiful story. They might not ever see it. Nobody might ever get to that. So was there a point, or was it just gradual?
It's, I mean, in all honesty, shooting VR with a camera, you've got control. Shooting VR in room scale is complete. You have no control whatsoever. So essentially, you're using photogrammetry to capture an environment, and then you're capturing performance with an actor with an array. I don't know if you know volumetric capture, but essentially there's 60 cameras up to 200. It's the opposite VR around the edge of a room and facing in, and you film the performer, and basically you stitch them together. So when you're in that room scale experience, you have no control whatsoever. You have no the user has 6 degrees of freedom, so they can move around, do whatever they want. You can't control what they're doing anymore. So that is more like we were saying earlier. That's more like gaming, But I'm enjoying the process of learning how to adapt to that. In terms of, I wouldn't even classify that as storytelling. That's experience.
Yeah.
You're giving people experiences, you're capturing performances, and you're giving them a unique vantage point to control how they experience it as well.
Is that hard as a director?
Yeah, but I enjoy letting go of that. I think it's a bit anal retentive directing sometimes. It's a little bit dictatorial, and it's more collaborative when you're working in these formats. And there's a bunch of really talented programmers that you're suddenly working with, as opposed to set designers. We do previs now. We do everything. It's more akin to gaming, the production, than having a designer and a set and carpenters. That's gone.
Were you able to see in real time anything at all off those 60? Or?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, I mean, you can see every angle, so you don't get it stitched. But that's, again, a laborious process. But in terms of filming actors now, you have to have volumetric. The world is not flat in VR. You have to have a volumetric model. So then all these companies like Red are obsolete. You can't shoot an actor anymore with a camera.
Unless you have 60 Reds.
Unless you have 60 Reds.
And you hand-stitch that.
Yeah.
I think you were next right there. Yes.
This is going back to the VR.
Sure.
In China, have you looked at the Asian market in general? Because I'm from Thailand, and they've had 4D theater for a couple of years now, because people are just into that thing. So is there a market for Korea or Japan or Thailand, these arcades, or
I would say that I've been in the tech industry for 30 years. I would say that that's the biggest upside that the world has ever seen is in China right now in terms of VR adaptability and AR. I've never seen anything like it. I would say Korea is trailing that. Obviously, Vietnam and Thailand are, going to be in the vicinity, but China they've embraced conceptually VR at the government level as a
It's more part of an identity, like national identity. Like, we're going to win at
precisely.
this.
It needs to happen. Put it that way.
Yeah, if you've been to China too, they have massive
Yeah.
arcade rooms.
I mean,
And in the U.S., the kind of use case for that is events. Like most of the VR that we do is for events.
Like Comic-Con.
So then do you
Yeah.
think the Asian market will like push for that before we do?
It already has.
Oh,
It
yeah.
already happened.
We don't- we
Train,
don't-
Train has left station.
Yeah, we don't have like institutional like arcade type.
Yeah.
They have like rooms that are 30,000 square feet that are you have 600 people that are all gaming there together. We just don't have that kind of culture
It's
here.
probably 10 to 1.
Yeah. Yes.
Question, how easy would it be for a hacker to hack one of these programs, or just hack into this type of system? Like, has that
You mean
Like,
to
what
do
are the,
my-
what's the
Oh, dude, as easy
vulnerability
as
of
anything
these
else.
stories? Yes.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the technology is advancing, but what about the safety of the user and their data not being hacked or worse?
There's not a lot of data that's being tracked
But I
personally
think
by the
maybe
user.
even having your experience hacked. I mean, maybe that's the question. Like, if you were in VR,
Yeah, I mean,
no
it's
one's had
as easy to
experience.
hack as anything else.
That's really
Yeah.
going to be a question for
Yeah.
the platform. So if you
Yeah.
look at a Jaunt Playout platform versus an Oculus and Samsung, those are the companies you really need to look at, and you need to look at their kind of, it's not so much an encryption issue, but it's going to be an identity management. Who's in there? Why are they in there? How many times have they tried to attempt to get in there and kick in? I mean, it really is about their security policies.
But there's
VR
the same
itself
encryption
isn't
that there
dangerous
is
like that.
anywhere in every other platform. Like Oculus encryption uses the same as Facebook encryption. I mean, it's like the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of layered security.
Yeah. Yes.
This question is relating back to the big pharma discussion.
Absolutely.
How do you get them to learn and adapt to VR for their research and such? What's the best strategy for that?
So the strategy for getting VR.
That's kind of a healthcare question.
Yeah,
honestly,
they'll get there
It's a highly
when it becomes.
specialized-
I think it's probably research dollars as well.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at the billions of dollars that they're spending, and it's more of a technology play.
One of the things that we're working on for a big pharma company is that to increase diversity in clinical trials. So we're trying to do storytelling and with different patients and kind of getting them a message of, what this disease and how it affects you, and essentially using that for recruitment. So we're just trying to find ways to adapt this technology because it's not really used in clinical research or big pharma.
Big Pharma's not really big on, non-pharmacological solutions. So this is probably a threat for them, I think, in a lot of ways, and they'll wait for, and there's a long trail of science that'll come out that'll talk about the benefits and stuff. I mean, I think it's more applicable in what the application that you're currently involved with is that you can steer people in a direction. As far as like, homeopathic effects of VR, I think that they'd laugh it off right now, but in 10 years they'll be like, oh God, what are we going to do now?
Yeah, I think
For
targeting
education and
will be the
training,
problem.
that's really where that's at, right? So you're producing highly empathetic scenarios, you're exposing your potential recruits to those empathetic scenarios and saying, if you do this, it will benefit you and your family, or something like that, right? And those kind of trials are hard to recruit people for, but I think you could really change minds pretty quickly. It's a brilliant idea.
Yes.
Who's investing in VR right now? Like, who are the people
Everybody.
who are paying for great stories to be told in VR?
Oh, well,
Tons of
no
brands.
no one's doing that.
Yeah. What's that company? Facebook,
Actually,
Google,
Yeah.
Apple,
Actually,
Sony,
Every single major tech
HTC.
company,
I mean, everybody.
every entertainment
In
company.
the last
Yeah.
sort of 30, 90 days, we're starting to see a couple of different big projects being funded by, Hollywood auteurs, if you will. So unfortunately, if you will, that's where the first money is going to go. It's not going to go to the mom and pop VR producers. I think you're in a situation where you're really aligned with brands, and I think that's actually going to keep expanding. And if you want to make money in VR and you have to pay the bills right now, focusing on brands and advertising.
Sounds like early YouTube a little bit. Like back in the
Yeah,
brands
I
of
mean,
future.
the main issue, I think, for the investment is the monetization or lack of it. So most of these experiences, like YouTube, is free. So people are now accustomed to not paying for VR.
But all the studios have major VR labs. So ILM,
Yeah.
Fox, everybody's got their component where they're investing, millions and millions of dollars.
But that's
in what
marketing
this
for the
will be.
movie,
it's-
No.
Yeah.
Like the ILM VR lab is not devoted to the marketing. In fact, the marketing people at Fox have no access to the VR lab, zero. They don't. They have to use vendors. well, luckily.
Yeah.
But the reality of what the studios think VR is very much the future of storytelling, and they're investing a lot of money. Like the stuff, the Star Wars experience was
R&D.
really just a little glimpse of what they're developing in terms of beyond the current cinematic roadmap.
And then also, if you're talking about venture funding too, venture funding is going towards VR platforms, not VR
Yeah,
content
platform,
right now.
yeah.
So we're,
And a
more
lot
than
of that
even
has to
hardware.
do with where the accounting industry is. If you think about people that invest, they want a return on investment. How do you value an asset in VR? How is it going to be depreciated over time? How am I going to make money off of that? Those models don't exist yet. And you'll see at so many of these panels, people say, what was your budget? What was your budget? And nobody wants to commit to that because that information is not only confidential, but it's all over the place. It's a dollar and it's a lot. But recently, Roy Taylor at Advanced Micro Devices has come out with a number, and he said it's going to be probably settling in at about $1 million a minute for AAA VR storytelling entertainment. That isn't to say that's a game. There's going to be so many other ancillary pieces there, but that's his number. He was made that public at VRLA in July, I think.
In the back row, yes, sir. What's yours?
Can you talk about how music might tie into these different platforms at all?
Yeah, I mean,
Music or sound?
Oh, music. I mean, I've made 4 music videos now, and I think it's a great platform. Actually, MTV obviously doesn't even play music anymore. So, most people are consuming their music visually through YouTube or Vivo. So I think VR and room scale VR is a brilliant way of monetizing VR. Actually, we're talking to a lot of concert promoters. NextVR just signed a 5-year deal with Live Nation, to basically broadcast all of the Live Nation shows in VR. They've also got the same deal with Fox. So I think one of the first monetization areas is going to be in music performance.
Music and sports.
There's such a demand. I used to work for a company called SFX. We had a festival called Tomorrowland, which had 6 million ticket requests, for 360,000 tickets. So we had the idea of, why don't you give them a VR pass for $20, and then you have those, 5.5 million plus people watching the show.
You can download the app. There's an app in the App Store now called Spinnable that does 360 work out of our offices. They put a 360 camera in front of like all these concerts, and then you sell $5 concert tickets for live events. And there's also when I was just in Boston a couple days ago, we did a 1,000-person live stream for the Hamilton crew, doing spoken word. It's the largest live stream that we did at once, and I mean that's not music specifically, but you can see the use case.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it was It was live.
Yeah. And if we're doing,
The background music. Yeah, I mean that again. I think binaural and spatial audio. Positional audio is a brilliant device for a director to tell the user where to look. So I think sound is people are saying it's 60% of the experience. I'm not sure if that's
At
entirely
least.
true, but
It depends.
but it's an incredibly valuable form of direction, actually.
So if you look at what Skywalker Ranch is doing right now as part of ILM, right, or associated, and they're incorporating Dolby Atmos, so object sound, to be able to create these production designs and sound designs. It doesn't work as well for live. And, live's got other issues, and the main issue for live is just basically you're creating petabytes of data, and how long do you save that data and those kinds of things. That's why these things become available and then they're gone. Just in the NBA Finals last year, Intel sponsored that, and they were for one 40-second 360 of a play. They were creating 2 petabytes of data, so they had to basically go through and slice that out because it becomes a problem of enormity very quickly. But it's really good for companies that are building huge cloud storage. We're going to have petabytes, and then whatever the heck comes after that, all the way up to Google.
THX was just purchased by Razer, a gaming company out of San Diego, a couple days ago, and it's because specifically of their work in sort of peripheral development and exactly what you guys are talking about, sort of that spatial audio. It's moving toward interactive, and in film, it's not really as there's no upside there.
Yeah. John just did a 6-part series with Paul McCartney, and they actually got Jeff Emmerich, who produced Paul's original songs, to remix in Dolby Atmos for VR. So you can actually go and have a different experience. It's, I think it was Mull of Kintyre, it was one of his famous songs, but he went back in and did positional audio. So that's worth checking out for sure.
Yeah, I know our whole company's all about live performance in VR in like 3D, like think of gaming environments, but with DJs performing, so you can be co-president of the show to solve the Tomorrowland challenge, right? Not enough tickets, or you don't want to be in that crowd, or you don't want to go to Belgium, or you just want to go for 15 minutes. Like there's all sorts of friction points for people who love music, right? That are going to be reduced by VR. Same with story. There's also friction that's reduced by being able to bring these immersive experience, or immersive is not going to be the word. It's going to be this new thing with what you're talking about with the AR in your brain, but neuroimmersive experiences. Yeah, neuroimmersive. Well, I'm sorry, I just coined a phrase, neuroimmersive. Live it. So I'm sorry. Go.
I just bought the domain. It's mine now.
Okay, neuroimmersive.net, super hot. Kleiner Perkins is on board. So, sorry.
Are you doing this with your own tools,
Yes.
platform, or basing a business on having to use Unreal or Unity or?
Oh, how are we doing it? Oh, is the question?
Well, yeah. Because, I mean,
Oh, it's in Unity for now, but you got to just,
now.
yeah, it's in Unity.
Okay.
Simple.
Everything, like 60% of all experiences are
Yeah.
built in Unity right now.
I can send you a code if you want to try it out. It's in Vive.
I was the follow-up question
Oh, sorry.
one of it about mom and pops that came a moment ago.
Oh.
You found once you started the word skepticism. So
Sure.
It's gonna kill you.
Ah, it's okay.
Tools. Let's talk about tools for a moment. Ownership of tools. Artists owning their tools so that they can be a mom and pop or a small indie developer, and an industry can develop, opposed to having to give Unity 40% of everything you make once you start making something.
You don't have to give Unity everything you make. It's
Yeah.
just a license fee.
Fine. Print.
Well, no, I mean, we
Okay,
sell
you-
stuff. We
wait,
sell
wait,
stuff on.
You
we
cannot
sell stuff on
ask
Vive.
and answer the question.
Yeah,
It's-
yeah.
It's no longer a question.
Yeah. I mean, we sell stuff on Vive, and we don't give them 40%. No one does. All mobile games are built. Like almost every mobile game that you see is built on Unity. They don't
Yeah.
give Unity 40% of their license fees.
Well, what do you got?
A hangover and.
Yes. That's okay, because we've got VR solutions for that.
Yeah, exactly.
At $1 million a minute, for any of the equivalent of an independent film marketplace in VR. So for experiences that are independent shops that want to create premium VR, is there a path to that in the next 18 months in any of the panelists' minds? Or are we immediately priced out?
Yeah, think of that as being fully loaded, guild rates, with maybe an A-lister or two in the feature. So there's a lot of costs that you can take out. And right now, people are getting extraordinary projects done in kind, cameras being brought to the table, people working together to, stealing shots wherever you go. And then working as teams. I mean, it's a rough space, and people aren't willing to pony that much money up yet. But what that does is it puts a ceiling and a floor in there, that number, and then somebody can say, hey, I'm going to make an episodic. It's going to cost $12 million, and it's going to generate $102 million over the course of 12 months. Are you in? And that helps people understand what the cost benefit and the ROI is on.
I think he's asking maybe a little different, like, is something going to democratize it so that he could drive his indie VR costs down and be like, sure, there's the $1 million a minute movie, right? We can go see Star Wars, but I don't want Star Wars. I just want to tell a story in my backyard, but it's really emotional. You're going to be feeling it. Can I do it for 50,000?
Well, there's also a
$100,000.
There's an organization called Kaleidoscope, and their original mission was to create an open source workflow, essentially pipelines, so that people could contribute and improve it. I can assure you that will occur over time, and that pipeline is essential.
I've actually got a question for all five of you, which is shared knowledge. So it's actually very difficult to get knowledge. Like you were talking about directing, you're talking about Kaleidoscope. What resources do you recommend? This is people pre-selected. They want to know more on not just in this hour, but an ongoing basis. Where do you go to stay contemporary, to keep learning?
Well, yeah.
As things happen.
Honestly, we're sort of like the five of us are probably doing this stuff, So
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, we look for peers. Yeah,
Yeah.
we look at what our friends are doing. We look at the, the things that are sort of like being shown to one of us. I'm going to go do the ear thing right after. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh, nice.
So, no, I'm not, but I mean, I'm saying, the reality of it is that there is not right now, I don't think, I mean, there's the new developer center at Oculus, which is sort of a move in that direction to kind of begin to teach people how to do this from a certain
Does everyone know what he's
perspective.
talking about? Okay.
They,
Tell
just,
him.
they have like a big school now or
Yeah.
whatever. So, in the end, I think it's one of those fields where it's sort of grassroots and exploding from the inside out. So, get immersed in it.
There are a lot of forums
Go make
right
stuff.
now, and there's a couple of people in the audience who've been working in the VR space for well over 20 years. Those forums will kind of resurrect themselves and filmmakers, and it's a community. I think for the most part, people are willing to reach out and work with each other. There are a few people that are starting not to do that, but those become proprietary environments anyways.
And they'll get wiped out.
I think there's a really good organization called Women in VR. Obviously, it's very specifically targeting women, but they have a lot of meetups and groups and information. So I have a lot of friends in that group, and they're really encouraging more female activity in VR. And then my other friends are on Upload VR, which is a really good resource actually for what's going on. They have daily newsletters and a really good Friday roundup of what's happening in the industry, and they also have links to new work all the time.
We do a VR meetup at our co-working space every month. Meets there, so just search VR.
Playa del Rey.
Yeah, Control Collective. Just
Oh, and the Halloween party.
Yeah.
I'm going to the Vice party. It's going to be
Yeah,
hot like fire.
we're owners
27th.
of Control Collective. So, I mean, if you search like VR LA Control Collective or VR LA meetups, there's monthly talks that talk about, like last month we did one that was all about user experience in VR, and we'll do one on the Sony lot, I think, coming up, and so check that out.
We've become active in the World VR Forum as well, both in Europe and in Asia, and now in the U.S. So look for World VR Forum to begin spreading the news, if you will, as well.
Shout out to, I don't work with them, but VR Scout is in the same building.
Yeah,
Oh,
they're
wow. So there's
partners of
like
ours,
a
yeah.
whole-
They're a great community resource.
Yeah, they're awesome.
And local and community driven.
Cool. So good. So now everybody can stay in touch because we're out of time. People, it's been great. Thank you very much for your 75 minutes.